The candles were already lit when Camille walked through the front door. That was the first wrong thing. She stood in the doorway of the house she had lived in for 11 years, rolling bag still in her hand. The smell of something warm and floral. Not her scent, not anything she owned, drifting from the direction of the dining room. The kind of candles you light for someone. Tall, ivory, expensive. The kind she had asked Damon to buy for their anniversary dinner 3 years in a row, and he had always forgotten. He hadn't forgotten tonight. Her keys were still in her hand. She hadn't moved. And somehow, in the part of her that had been quietly noticing things for longer than she cared to admit, she already understood that whatever she was walking into had been here long before she arrived home. Before we go any further, welcome. If you are new here, you are at Morel Folktales, where every story is original, every voice is real, and every ending is earned. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop a comment right now and tell me, where in the world are you watching from tonight? I see y'all from Houston, Chicago, Atlanta, London. Let me know you're here. Now, let's get back to Camille. She had been in Charlotte for 4 days. A textile conference, the kind that mattered for the boutique manufacturing consultancy she had built from a one-desk operation in her cousin's back room into a firm with 7 employees and clients in 4 states. Camille Celestine did not take vacations. She took working trips, and she called them something else so that Damon would not complain about her being gone. She had learned to do that. Rename things. Soften the edges of her ambition so it would fit inside their marriage without scraping the walls. She set her bag down in the hallway. The house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like someone had just stopped talking. The dining room table, visible from where she stood, held 2 wine glasses. One with a ring of Merlot at the bottom, one still half full. The candles were still burning. She walked to the kitchen first, the way she always did when she came home. A habit, a ritual, checking that the house was the house she'd left. Everything looked right. Everything felt wrong. A perfume lingered near the counter. She lifted a dish towel and set it down again. Then she heard the voice from upstairs. Not words, just a tone. A woman's tone. Familiar in a way that didn't make sense, shouldn't make sense, and yet settled into her chest like something that had been waiting to settle. She knew that laugh. Priya Okafor had been Camille's best friend for 14 years. They had met at a women's entrepreneurship workshop in Atlanta. Camille presenting, Priya in the front row with a yellow legal pad and no fear of asking questions. They had gone to dinner after. Talked for 4 hours. Priya had been in Camille's wedding. Had held her hand in the hospital when Camille lost a pregnancy she had never told Damon she'd been hoping for. Had cried with her. Prayed with her. Had, apparently, been in her house while she was in Charlotte. Camille stood at the bottom of the stairs. She did not call out. She did not move toward the sound. She simply listened, the way she had always listened, completely, carefully, storing everything. Then footsteps. Then Damon's voice, low and urgent in the way it got when he was managing something. Then quiet again. He appeared at the top of the stairs in a t-shirt she didn't recognize. He saw her and went completely still. Camille. A statement, not a greeting. I came home early, she said. Her voice was level. The last panel was canceled. He came down the stairs slowly. Behind him, above, she heard a door close. The guest room, she noted. Not their room. That, at least. Listen, he started. Is Priya here? She asked. He stopped on the 3rd step from the bottom. His jaw shifted. Yeah. She nodded once. Okay. He blinked. Camille. I'm going to make some tea, she said, and walked back toward the kitchen. That was not the moment she fell apart. People always assume that is the moment, the confirmation, the name spoken out loud. But Camille had already moved past that moment, had been moving past it for months without fully knowing it. The real dismantling had happened slower, quieter, in the small things she had talked herself out of noticing. The cologne that started appearing on his collar in a brand she hadn't bought him. The way his laughter, rich, full, easy, now seemed to happen mostly somewhere she wasn't. The text notification she'd glimpsed once, not meaning to, the screen lighting as she passed, a name she recognized in a context she shouldn't have. She had talked herself out of all of it. Told herself she was tired, overworked, paranoid. That 14 years of friendship and 11 years of marriage were not things people threw away. That she was imagining the distance. That she was projecting. Camille was many things, but she had learned, finally, that she was not imagining. She made her tea. Earl Grey. 2 sugars. She stood at the counter and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard where the oak tree she'd planted the year they bought the house had grown enormous and still. Priya came downstairs 20 minutes later. Camille heard her hesitate in the hallway. Then she appeared in the kitchen doorway. Dressed. Composed. Her eyes wet but her posture upright. A woman bracing for impact and trying not to look like it. "Camille," she said. "Sit down, Priya. I need to explain." "Sit down." Priya sat. Camille set her mug on the counter and looked at her oldest friend. She took the full measure of her, the guilt, yes, but also something else. Something like relief, almost. The relief of something finally being in the open. "How long?" Camille asked. Priya's hands were folded on the table. 7 months. 7. Not 2. Not a mistake that snowballed. 7 months of Sundays, of phone calls, of her own name being said in rooms she wasn't in. 7 months of Priya sitting across from her at brunch, commenting on her Instagram, asking how the Charlotte conference was going. 7 months, Camille repeated. Not as accusation, just as information she was filing. "Camille, I am so sorry. I know that doesn't." "You're right," Camille said. "It doesn't." She picked up her mug, walked to the sink, poured the rest of the tea out, rinsed the cup. Then she turned and looked at Priya one more time. "You should go home." Damon came to find her that night. She was in the bedroom, their bedroom, sitting in the chair by the window, not reading, not scrolling. Just watching the rain that had started while Priya's car was pulling out of the driveway. Hard rain. The kind that makes the street look like a river. He stood in the doorway. He had the expression she had seen before. Remorse braided with something else. Something she could only call readiness. Like a man who had already decided something and was now just arriving at the part where he says it. "I didn't want it to happen like this," he said. "I know. I was going to tell you when you got back. I was going to do this the right way." "The right way," she said. He sat on the edge of the bed. "I care about you, Camille. I do. But something has been missing for a long time, and I think you know that." She looked at the ring. "I'm not trying to hurt you," he continued. "I want us to handle this like adults. I've already talked to someone, a mediator. I think we can separate without all the ugliness. I don't want to fight you on anything." That was the sentence. "I don't want to fight you on anything." Generous. Reasonable. The exact language of a man who has already spoken to an attorney and knows what fighting would cost. "I appreciate that," she said. He looked surprised. "Yeah. I said I appreciate it, Damon." He exhaled. "I know this is a lot. And I know the timing is. I know it's bad. But I think in the long run, we'll both be better." She turned to look at him then. Really look. She studied the man who had proposed to her in the parking lot of the restaurant where they'd had their first date because he forgot to make a reservation at the nicer place. Who used to leave her handwritten notes in her laptop bag on mornings she had early meetings. Who she had watched slowly, quietly, stop looking at her like she was worth the effort of being seen. "When did you stop being happy?" she asked. He paused. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." He was quiet for a long time. "About 2 years ago." 2 years. She had been carrying this for 2 years without knowing it was already decided. "Okay," she said, and turned back to the window. He waited for more. There wasn't any more. He was gone by the following evening. He packed 3 bags. She noticed it was precisely 3. Organized. Efficient. The packing of a man who had planned ahead. And moved into a place she would later learn he had been renting for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He had signed a lease before he told her. The house felt different the moment the door closed behind him. Not emptier. Lighter. Almost. which disturbed her more than any sadness she might have expected. She walked from room to room in the quiet. The dining room, the living room, the kitchen, the guest room where the sheets had been washed and folded with a precision that told her the washing had happened before she came home, not after. She stood in the guest room doorway for a while. Then she closed the door. Her phone rang at 11:30 that night. A number she didn't know. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 7 the next morning. Same number. She answered. Is this Camille Celestine? A woman's voice. Professional. A little careful. It is. My name is Francine Walcott. I'm a senior attorney with Walcott, Breyer and Associates in New York. I'm calling regarding the estate of Ezekiel Ambrose Fontaine. A pause. He was your grandfather's youngest brother. We believe you are the surviving primary beneficiary of his estate. Camille sat down on the edge of her bed. I'm sorry, she said. Can you say that again? If you are still watching at this point, and I see you, drop the words she already knew in the comments. Let's see who is truly writing this story out with me. Keep going, because this is where everything changes. Ezekiel Fontaine had been, by every measure that mattered, a ghost. Camille knew the name the way you know the names of people in old photographs, distantly, without dimension. Her mother had mentioned him twice in her childhood. Her grandfather, Reginald Fontaine, a quiet, principled man who had raised 3 children on a schoolteacher's salary in Mississippi, had a brother who had left in the 1970s and never come back in any way that counted. He had gone north, then west, then abroad. He had built something, her mother had said once, but she said it the way people say things they don't want to examine too closely. What Ezekiel Fontaine had built, it turned out, was a holding company headquartered in Geneva with subsidiaries across 6 continents. Real estate, energy infrastructure, a pharmaceutical distribution arm, a logistics company that serviced 4 African ports. The kind of empire that doesn't appear in the news because the people who build it know that visibility is a liability. Francine Walcott, the attorney, spoke for 40 minutes. Camille took notes in a legal pad she found in her desk drawer. Her handwriting was steady. The estate's total value, including liquid and illiquid assets, was just over $100 billion. Ezekiel had never married. He had no children. He had, apparently, watched from a deliberate distance, sending money, anonymously, to his brother Reginald's family through a charitable trust Camille's mother had always assumed was a church organization. He had paid for things, quietly, without acknowledgement. He had died 11 days ago in Geneva, at 83, of heart failure. He had updated his will 6 months prior. Camille's name was the only one on it. Why me? She asked. Francine paused. He left a letter. For you specifically. We can have it couriered. But given the nature of the estate, we'd like to meet with you in person in New York as soon as possible. There are documents that require your signature and decisions that need to be made within a 30-day window. Camille looked out the window. The morning light was coming in sideways through the curtains she had chosen. The ones Damon had complained were too pale, too plain. She had kept them anyway. I can be in New York by Thursday, she said. She told no one for 3 days. Not her cousin Naomi, who called twice and left a voicemail that said I heard about Damon and Priya. Baby, call me when you're ready. Not her office manager, Dell. Not anyone. She kept going. She watered the oak tree because it had been dry. She answered emails. She made appointments. She sat with what she knew, the way she had always sat with hard things, quietly, privately, turning them over until they settled into a shape she could carry. On the second evening, she called her attorney. Not a divorce attorney. She had already spoken to one of those, a woman named Clara Dixon, recommended by a client, sharp and unhurried. She called her business attorney, Roland Ash, who had structured her firm's contracts for 5 years and who she trusted the way you trust someone who has never once tried to impress you. I need to talk to you about something, she said. Name a time, he said. She named it. They met the following morning. She told him everything. The inheritance, the Geneva firm, the 30-day window. She also told him about Damon. not to connect the two things, but because Roland needed the full picture. He listened without interrupting, which was why she trusted him. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then, did Damon know about the potential inheritance? Camille paused. Why? Because before you sign anything with the New York attorneys, I want to know what he's already signed or tried to initiate. If he knew there was even a possibility of a significant estate. He said he didn't want to fight me on anything. Roland looked at her over his glasses. That's what concerns me. It was Naomi who told her the rest of it. Naomi Celestine, Camille's cousin by her father's side, lived 2 blocks away and had never liked Damon with the particular quiet intensity of a woman who sees clearly what people in love cannot afford to see. She had been to every family gathering, every birthday dinner, every Christmas. She had watched. She came over on day 3. She brought food, something Naomi always did in crisis, because she believed food was the least complicated form of love. She set the containers on the kitchen counter without fanfare and sat down. How are you? She asked. I'm functioning, Camille said. That's different from fine. I know. Naomi looked at her carefully. Then, I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. And I need you to not be angry at me for waiting. Camille sat down across from her. About 4 months ago, Naomi said, I ran into Priya at the pharmacy. We were cordial, you know how it is. And she said something. I thought it was just strange, I filed it away. She said, Naomi exhaled. She said, I heard Camille might be coming into some money from an old family connection. Big money. She laughed when she said it. Like it was just gossip. Camille's hands were flat on the table. I didn't think anything of it, Naomi said. I thought it was just talk. But then when I heard about her and Damon, I started thinking, who told her that? How did she know anything about your family? Because I didn't even know about any family money, Camille. Nobody talked about it. So where did Priya hear it? The silence in the kitchen was complete. Damon's company, Camille said slowly. He had a client last year, an estate law firm. He mentioned it once at dinner, said he'd done some restructuring work for them. She paused. He never told me the name of the firm. You think he found something out through work? I think, Camille said carefully, that Damon is a smart man who started planning for a future he hadn't told me about. She stood up, went to her laptop on the counter, opened her email and scrolled until she found the thread from 3 weeks prior, the same week Damon had signed that apartment lease. A forward from a contact at his firm, a man named Terrence, who occasionally sent her articles he thought she'd find relevant. The forwarded email had a message attached. Thought you might want to see this before it becomes public. The Geneva transfer cleared. Big one. She had not opened it when it arrived. She had flagged it. She had meant to get back to it. She opened it now. The attachment was a financial brief, the kind that circulated in certain legal and investment circles before major estates became public record. Ezekiel Fontaine's holdings. His net worth, estimated. His named beneficiary, not specified in the brief, but the family connection noted. The date on the brief was 4 months ago. The same month Priya had made that comment at the pharmacy. The same month, Camille realized, as she scrolled through her own memory like a filing cabinet, that Damon had first suggested she consider updating her will. She closed the laptop. Naomi was watching her. What is it? He knew, Camille said, not with anger, with the still, clear quality of something being confirmed. He's been moving toward this for months. He wanted to be married to me when the estate transferred, or he wanted something he could use in the divorce. She paused. The mediator he mentioned, the no ugliness approach. He was going to come in cooperative and positioned. He needed this to look uncomplicated. Lord, Naomi said quietly. He didn't leave because he fell in love with Priya, Camille said. He left because he thought the timing worked in his favor. Come in for the soft landing. Get what he could. Let the split look mutual. She was quiet for a moment. Then, he just didn't know I'd already spoken to Clara Dixon. Clara Dixon, divorce attorney, had earned her reputation in Atlanta handling cases where powerful men underestimated their wives. She was not fierce in the way people expected. She was precise. She was thorough. And she had told Camille, in their very first meeting, 1 week before Damon announced he was leaving, the best position you can be in is the one your husband doesn't know you're already in. Camille had not come to that meeting by accident. She had come because of a morning, 6 months prior, when she'd woken up at 4 a.m. with a feeling she could not name and had lain in the dark listening to her husband sleep and understood, clearly, finally, without drama, that she was preparing for something she hadn't yet been told. She had done what she always did when she understood something. She had prepared. She had begun quietly, pulling financial records, noting the accounts, understanding exactly what was marital, what was separate, what had been earned before the marriage, and what had been built inside it. She had made copies of everything and kept them somewhere Damon had never been. She had met with Clara, then with Roland. Then she had gone to Charlotte and given a conference presentation and answered emails and come home to lit candles and a borrowed perfume and the sound of a woman's laugh in the upper hallway of her own house. She had not collapsed. She had not been surprised. She had simply arrived. The meeting in New York was on a Thursday morning in late October. Roland flew up with her. They sat across from Francine Walcott and two other attorneys in a conference room on the 44th floor with a view of the Hudson River gray and enormous below them. Before they began the business, Francine handed Camille a sealed envelope. Ivory, her name written on the front in handwriting that was careful and a little formal, the handwriting of a man who had taught himself precision. She opened it. The letter was 3 pages. Handwritten. She read it while everyone waited. Ezekiel Fontaine wrote that he had followed her career through a private researcher for 11 years. He wrote that he had been watching all of the family from a distance, but that she was the one who reminded him of himself, not in temperament, he said, but in posture. You stand like a person who has decided something and is not asking for permission. He wrote that he had built everything he built without anyone believing he could. He wrote that he was leaving it to her not because she was the only blood left. There were distant others, but because she was the only one who had already proven she could be trusted with something real. The last paragraph. I know you will be told this changes everything. It does not. You were already this person. This is simply the world catching up. She folded the letter, set it on the table, looked at Francine. Where do we begin? She said. She did not call Damon. She did not call Priya. She let the news find its own way, the way things always do, through the particular velocity of people who should not know but always seem to. A week after the New York meeting, Damon's attorney reached out to Clara Dixon with revised language. Cooperative had become cautious. Cautious became concerned. The mediator he had initially proposed quietly withdrew from the arrangement. Damon called her directly one evening. She answered. I heard something, he said. I imagine you did, she said. Camille, I just want to say. Damon. Her voice was measured, unhurried. Clara Dixon handles all communication now. You have her number. A long pause. I didn't. I wasn't trying to. I know, she said. And so does my attorney. She ended the call. She stood in the kitchen for a moment after. The same kitchen, the same window, the same oak tree in the backyard bending in the wind. Then she went and made her tea. 2 sugars, Earl Grey, and she stood there in the quiet of the house that was finally, unmistakably, entirely hers, and she let herself feel the enormous, exhausting, complicated relief of a woman who had finally stopped waiting to be believed. The divorce was finalized 5 months later. It was, from a legal standpoint, unremarkable. The inheritance had been filed as separate property. Roland had ensured that before the ink dried in New York. The marital assets, the house, certain accounts, the appreciating property they'd bought in Savannah, were divided with a precision that satisfied no one and surprised everyone who'd expected a war. Priya sent a letter, a real one, handwritten. Camille read it once, carefully, the way she read everything. Then she filed it in a drawer she did not expect to open again soon. There were people who expected her to be different after. Louder, maybe. Transformed in some visible, dramatic way. She wasn't. She was still Camille. She still went to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. She still called Naomi on Sundays. She still watered the oak tree. She flew to Geneva in the spring. Francine accompanied her. They spent 4 days in meetings, in offices that smelled of old wood and cold air, negotiating the structure of a transition that would take years. She asked questions that impressed people who expected to be waiting for her to be ready. She was already ready. She had been ready. She kept the boutique firm. Her 7 employees. Dell, her office manager, who had started as a temp and stayed for 5 years. She did not dissolve it into the larger enterprise, not yet. It mattered to her in the way the beginning of something always matters, not for what it was worth, but for what it cost. On the last night in Geneva, she stood at the window of her hotel room looking out at the lake, which was perfectly still and blue-black in the darkness. She thought about Ezekiel, about a young man who had left Mississippi with nothing but a refusal to be small. She thought about her grandfather Reginald, who had never had that chance. About her mother, who had mentioned a brother once or twice, and then let the topic drift away like smoke. She thought about the morning she had lain awake at 4 a.m. listening to a marriage breathe its last, quiet breath, and had decided, not dramatically, not with fury, but with the absolute clarity of someone who finally stops pretending she doesn't see what she sees, that she would not be caught standing still. She had prepared, and preparation, it turned out, was not about the inheritance or the attorneys or the financial records tucked in a safe place. Preparation was about knowing yourself so completely that when someone tries to define you by your worst moment, you are already standing somewhere they cannot reach. There is a particular kind of dignity that lives only on the far side of betrayal. Not the kind that comes from winning. Not the kind that comes from watching someone else lose. The kind that arrives quietly, at a hotel window, or in a kitchen in the early morning, when you realize that the person you are right now, calm, clear, forward-facing, is not who you became because of the pain. She was always this person. The pain just burned away everything that was hiding her. On a Tuesday morning in late May, Camille Celestine drove herself to the farmer's market, bought tomatoes and fresh basil, and a bunch of sunflowers so yellow they almost looked like something someone had invented. She brought them home and arranged them in a wide-mouthed vase she placed on the kitchen table near the window. She stood back and looked at them. Then she sat down and opened her laptop and started writing the first internal memo of her new role. To the leadership teams of Fontaine Global Holdings, this is how I intend to lead. Outside, the oak tree was enormous in the morning light. Patient, still, rooted exactly where she had planted it. It had simply needed time to become what it always was. If you enjoyed Camille's story, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe to Morel Folktales for new stories every single day. And drop a comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. I read every single one. New stories drop every day.